The wrestling world just received news that nobody saw coming, and the shockwaves are being felt from Toronto to every corner of the globe where fans remember the excellence of execution. Bret Hart, one of the most technically gifted performers to ever lace up a pair of boots, finds himself at the center of a story that has left millions of supporters absolutely stunned and searching for answers about what really happened behind closed doors. This isn't about a scripted betrayal in Montreal or a storyline that kept us on the edge of our seats during Monday night broadcasts. This is real life unfolding in ways that seem almost impossible to believe when you consider everything this man has accomplished inside the squared circle and the legacy he built over decades of dedication to professional wrestling. If you're watching this right now, then make sure to hit that subscribe button, because we're diving deep into every single detail of this developing situation and you won't want to miss a second of what comes next. The news broke earlier with reports confirming that legal proceedings had concluded in a manner that nobody anticipated, especially those who have followed Bret's career from his early days as part of the legendary Hart family dynasty in Calgary. The specifics of the sentencing have created countless questions among those who grew up watching him perform some of the greatest matches in history, from his classic encounters that defined an entire generation to the moments that cemented his place among the all-time greats. Court documents revealed a situation far more complex than anyone could have imagined, involving circumstances that developed over an extended period and ultimately led to proceedings that captured attention far beyond the wrestling community. Legal experts who analyzed the case pointed to multiple factors that influenced the final decision, including evidence presented during hearings that painted a picture vastly different from the public persona millions came to know and respect throughout his storied career. Understanding how we arrived at this point requires looking back at the journey that brought Bret Hart from the famous Hart Dungeon in Calgary to becoming one of the most respected names in professional wrestling history. He wasn't handed opportunities based on connections alone. He earned every single accolade through countless hours of training under the watchful eye of his father Stu Hart, a taskmaster who demanded perfection and accepted nothing less than complete dedication from everyone who stepped into his basement training facility. The youngest of 12 children in the Hart family, Bret learned early that success required sacrifice and an unwavering commitment to excellence that would become his calling card throughout his entire career. His technical ability inside the ring was second to none, executing moves with precision that made everything look effortless even though each maneuver required years of practice to perfect. Tag team championships with his brother-in-law Jim Neidhart established him as a legitimate competitor, but it was his singles run that truly showcased what separated him from everyone else on the roster. The rise to main event status didn't happen overnight for the Hitman. It came through consistent performances that demonstrated an understanding of ring psychology that few could match. Every punch, every hold, every sequence told a story that kept audiences invested from the opening bell to the final pinfall. His matches weren't just athletic exhibitions, they were carefully crafted narratives that built emotion and created connections with people watching from every section of arenas around the world. Championship reigns came one after another as promoters recognized they had someone special on their hands, a performer who could work with anyone and deliver quality regardless of the opponent standing across from him. International tours expanded his fan base beyond North America, with particularly strong followings developing in countries where technical wrestling was appreciated and celebrated as an art form rather than just entertainment. Behind the success and the accolades existed pressures that outsiders couldn't fully comprehend unless they experienced the lifestyle firsthand. Constant travel meant months away from family, living out of suitcases and hotel rooms while maintaining a schedule that would break most people physically and mentally. Injuries accumulated over time, each bump and collision taking a toll on a body that was asked to perform at the highest level night after night without adequate time for recovery. Pain management became part of the routine, with prescription medications helping wrestlers push through discomfort that would sideline athletes in other sports. The culture within the business during those years normalized behaviors that would raise serious concerns in today's environment, creating situations where warning signs were overlooked or dismissed as just part of paying dues in a demanding profession. Personal relationships suffered under the strain of a career that demanded everything and left little room for balance. Marriage faced challenges when one partner spent 300 days a year on the road, missing important family moments and major milestones that can never be recaptured or relived. Financial pressures existed despite the fame, with money management becoming problematic for performers who earned substantial sums but also spent freely during years when income flowed steadily. Retirement planning wasn't prioritized the way it should have been, leaving many former stars struggling after their in-ring careers ended and the guaranteed paychecks stopped arriving. These factors created stress that manifested in various ways, sometimes leading to decisions that seemed reasonable in the moment but carried consequences that wouldn't become apparent until much later. The infamous incident in Montreal fundamentally changed Bret's relationship with the business he loved and altered the trajectory of his career in ways that rippled outward for years afterward. What happened that night created genuine animosity and burned bridges that would take decades to even partially rebuild. Moving to a rival promotion brought new challenges and opportunities, but also placed him in an environment where the style of wrestling differed significantly from what he had mastered over his career. A career-ending injury came during a match that should have been routine, delivered in a way that resulted in damage, forcing him into premature retirement before he was ready to walk away on his own terms. The years that followed brought health complications, including a stroke that threatened his life and required extensive rehabilitation to regain basic functions that everyone takes for granted until they're suddenly gone. Adjusting to life after wrestling proved difficult for someone whose entire identity had been wrapped up in being a performer. The adulation of crowds was replaced by quiet days where nobody was chanting his name or celebrating his victories. Income opportunities decreased dramatically compared to the earning power he possessed during his prime years. Legal battles over contract disputes and intellectual property rights consumed time and resources while creating additional stress during a period when focus should have been on healing and moving forward. Personal demons that had been manageable during active competition became harder to ignore when the structure and purpose provided by a wrestling schedule disappeared. Relationships that had already been strained deteriorated further as underlying issues came to the surface without the distraction of constant travel and performance obligations. The circumstances that led to legal involvement developed gradually rather than resulting from a single incident or decision. Multiple people provided testimony describing patterns of behavior that painted a troubling picture when examined collectively. Financial irregularities raised questions about transactions and dealings that didn't align with information provided to relevant authorities. Communications recovered during investigations revealed conversations that contradicted public statements and created doubt about the accuracy of previous explanations offered for various actions. Character witnesses attempted to provide context by speaking to positive qualities and generous acts performed over the years, but prosecutors presented evidence suggesting a different side that had been carefully hidden from public view. Defense attorneys argued for leniency based on health issues and contributions to the wrestling industry, emphasizing a lifetime of bringing joy to millions of fans worldwide. The trial itself became a spectacle that drew media attention far beyond typical coverage of legal proceedings. Courtroom observers described emotional testimony from individuals directly affected by the actions under examination. Expert witnesses provided analysis of evidence and offered professional opinions about the significance of various pieces of information introduced during the proceedings. The defense strategy focused on challenging the interpretation of events and questioning the credibility of certain testimonies, attempting to create reasonable doubt about the conclusions being drawn by prosecutors. Cross-examinations became contentious as attorneys pressed witnesses about inconsistencies in their statements and potential motivations for coming forward with allegations. Throughout the process, Bret maintained a stoic demeanor that made it difficult to gauge his internal state or reaction to the testimony being presented. When the verdict was finally delivered, the atmosphere inside the courtroom reflected the gravity of the moment. Guilty findings on multiple charges set the stage for sentencing arguments that would determine the consequences moving forward. Prosecutors pushed for significant penalties, arguing that the severity of the offenses warranted substantial punishment regardless of past accomplishments or current health status. Defense counsel pleaded for mercy, pointing to advanced age and medical conditions that would make imprisonment particularly difficult to endure. Impact statements from those affected provided heartbreaking accounts of how the actions had caused lasting harm and created ongoing challenges in their lives. The judge considered all factors before announcing a sentence that included prison time, financial penalties, and restrictions that would extend well beyond any period of incarceration. The wrestling community's reaction split along predictable lines, with some rushing to defend a legend while others expressed disappointment and betrayal. Social media exploded with debates about separating the performer from the person and whether past entertainment value should factor into how someone is judged for present actions. Former colleagues shared memories of working with Bret while carefully avoiding direct commentary on the legal issues, walking a tightrope between acknowledging reality and protecting their own reputations. Fans who had idolized him for decades struggled to reconcile the hero they remembered with the individual described in court proceedings. Discussion boards filled with arguments about accountability, redemption, and whether enough time and good behavior could eventually repair a damaged legacy. Media coverage examined how this situation compared to other controversies involving famous athletes and entertainers who fell from grace after legal troubles emerged. Think pieces explored broader questions about celebrity worship and the danger of assuming that public personas accurately reflect private behavior. Investigative journalists dug deeper into aspects of the story that hadn't been fully explored during the trial, uncovering additional details that added context but also raised new questions about what else might not be publicly known. Television programs dedicated entire segments to analyzing the case from multiple angles, bringing in legal commentators and wrestling historians to provide perspective for audiences trying to understand what happened. The impact on Bret's family cannot be overstated, as they now face the reality of having a loved one removed from daily life and placed in an environment completely foreign to anything previously experienced. The Hart name, which carried such pride and represented excellence in professional wrestling for generations, now carries an association that younger family members will have to navigate as they build their own careers and identities. Financial implications extend beyond just the individual sentenced, potentially affecting family members who relied on income or support that will no longer be available. The emotional toll of watching someone you love go through this process and then face the consequences creates wounds that don't heal quickly or easily, if they ever truly heal at all. Historical reassessment of Bret's career has already begun, with some platforms removing content or adding disclaimers to materials featuring him prominently. Hall of Fame considerations for various organizations now require uncomfortable conversations about whether someone can be honored for athletic achievements while serving time for serious offenses. Documentary projects in development face decisions about whether to proceed with planned releases or significantly revise their approach to address the changed circumstances. Merchandising agreements are being reviewed and in some cases terminated as companies distance themselves from association with someone now considered controversial at best and toxic at worst. The legal appeals process will likely extend this story for months or years to come as attorneys explore every possible avenue for reducing the sentence or overturning certain aspects of the conviction. Experts suggest that given the nature of the charges and the evidence presented, the chances of success on appeal remain limited but not completely non-existent. New information could theoretically emerge that would change the calculation, though at this stage such developments seem unlikely based on the thoroughness of the investigation that preceded the trial. The reality facing Bret Hart involves coming to terms with consequences that will define the remainder of his life regardless of what happens with future legal maneuvering. Lessons from this situation extend to current performers who need to understand that fame doesn't provide immunity from accountability and that actions eventually catch up with everyone regardless of status or achievements. The wrestling business has changed dramatically from the era when Bret was in his prime, with greater awareness of problems that were previously ignored or tolerated. Support systems exist now that weren't available decades ago, providing resources for performers struggling with issues before they escalate to the point where intervention becomes necessary. The hope is that by learning from mistakes made by previous generations, current and future wrestlers can avoid similar pitfalls and maintain careers without destroying their lives in the process. Make sure you subscribe to stay updated on this story as it continues to develop and new information comes to light about what happens next in this ongoing situation.